Welcome to Rainbows and Razor Blades Productions, where chaos reigns in all of our content. And apparently, I almost always started out with confusion. Sorry, it's giving me a thing about channel points, and I'm confused. Anyway, creating tension. That is our topic for tonight. And actually, let me make the words a little bit bigger so people can read them better. No, not much of a difference. Oh, haha, it's helpful if I highlight them. It's a day, y'all. Oh, that's a little too big. There we go. That's better. All right. So one of the things that some of the great DMs and GMs do so well is tension in their storytelling, building up to big things or small things, like just laying these little clues and then leading the players to some little small discovery that's exciting for them. One of the best examples of all of this recently is obviously Brennan Lee Mulligan. He can have an entire table above their feet, just so into what they're doing and so anxious that it's just amazing to watch. And it's a thing that I strive for. So I decided that I was going to start looking more into how to create tension in my games. So some of the things that I have learned that I am attempting to implement, some of them I'm implementing well, some of them not so well, but we're getting there. For all intents and purposes, I am still a fairly new DM. Since we started in February, I've done quite a bit, but I'd only run maybe 10 to 15 games prior to that. So I'm learning along with all of you. So one of the first things that you want to do is to make your players care and their characters, not just with the big things, but also with the small moments. You want to find points that are going to get them in their feelings, whether it's a good feeling. God damn it, Tim and Kat. Hey, actually, step one is in here somewhere. But if you don't make them care and then create conflict with the things that they care about, then you're not going to get that tension. They're going to be like, oh, well, this is just the thing. Why should I care about it? You also want to give quiet moments for their characters. So yes, you want to make them care. You want to cause that conflict, whether it's in something within them that they're struggling with, or it's an outside influence that is getting to them. You also need those quiet moments where you can build the subtle plot points and reveal the small things that they do care about. Give them a chance to talk about a loved one that died or family that they miss. Let them give you things that you can later hurt them with, is what I like to say. You're not always gonna like give them a major hurt with it, but maybe like they get a letter from a brother that they mentioned 3 episodes prior that they said that they missed, and he's writing because he's been depressed lately and he misses you, and that's gonna make them feel just bad enough that they're like, oh, well, maybe I should be more in contact, that kind of thing. And with that, it's all about pacing. It shouldn't always be beat after beat after beat of tense moments. You need to have those subtle moments in there to build that tension, to give them a reason to care. You can have entire episodes that are beat after beat of tension. Get that one episode that's just one thing after another. They don't have a chance to breathe, and then leave that on a cliffhanger. Resolve it the next session, and then give them that small bit of breathing room to figure it all out and to get their head back on straight. Jesus Christ, you guys in the chat are gonna kill me. I'm not gonna look. I'm not gonna look. But you also need to continue to raise the stakes. The players are going to be more invested and their characters more driven if you don't let them win easily. Let them fail or give them a partial success, but with adverse consequences. If you're constantly like throwing monsters at them that they beat easily, and then they go off and are able to, even with not great rolls, find the information they're looking for, they're just gonna start being like, oh, so god damn it, I looked at the chat again. Maybe I'm just gonna close chat. Give me a second. Maybe. Haha, chat is gone. Y'all are gonna confuse me. I'll have Kat text me if there's any important questions or anything that come up. But yes, you want to continue to raise the stakes. Make sure that they have pitfalls. Make sure that they have obstacles that get in their way, so that they're not constantly just winning and the heroes. And on that note, don't always make them the heroes. They happen upon a fight, and the way things look, they jump in on one side or the other. But then it turns out that the people they helped are actually the bad guys in this situation. The world is not black and white. It is vastly amounts shades of gray. And you need that in your games to a level. Yeah, there's clearly bad guys, there's clearly good guys that are going back and forth with each other. But you also need those morally gray moments so that they are given a moment where they've got to stop and think, am I the bad guy? It gets them more invested in figuring out how to either be better or if they actually are the bad guys. Don't answer all of their questions, or at least not right away. The dice decide a lot of what information we give to the players, but on that note, even if they get a natural 20 and they roll like a 33 on their history, you can make it so that they only find partial information on it, or their god only gives them part of the answer in their prayer or what have you. Let them sit with the questions they have, and the unknowable is something that builds tension as well. If you can't figure out what's happening around you, then you're going to be more likely to keep digging for information. Drop little nuggets of information, keep them guessing. Because, I mean, if we give them all the information all the time, then, I mean, can you imagine watching Scooby-Doo if they found out who the bad guy was right in the beginning because they found a big clue? No, you gotta draw it out. Institute a time limit on things, a ticking clock. A lot of the times we do give players too much time to plan and decide and figure out their next move. But if you put a clock on the issue and you get them having to make decisions quickly and they don't have that time to think and actually like dig through their character sheet to see what would work best, then there's they might make mistakes, they might slip up, they might get caught. If they've got to infiltrate a building, have them get there and the guard schedule is different than they were told. They were hired to infiltrate it and they were given a guard schedule and they're like, it's very laid out like this, and this. Things are going to go smoothly. You're going to be great. And then they get there and there's more guards than they expected, or when they're coming around the building is different and they don't have the time to sit there and hide from them because they're already picking the lock. Maybe they're on an airship and it begins to go down mid-battle. Give them a time limit on how many rounds that they have to get it done. And they also have to fend off these attackers at the same time. You can give it the rounds, but you can also have it be, I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but the really quick decisions, like tell them, okay, you actually only have like 15 seconds here to figure out what you're doing, and then we're moving on to the next person. If you can't figure out what you're going to do, then we're skipping you this round. Make it so that they have a reason to think quickly, think on their feet, and then battles as you go will get quicker and there'll be more tension because they know that at any moment you can put a clock on something and they're going to be like, oh shit, we got to get this done right now. With conflict, and conflict isn't always fights. It can be inner conflict, it can be conflict with a patron, it can be conflict with God, it can be obstacles that have shown up in their way, like an annoying NPC who has been following them around and it's like, oh hey, I'm gonna go tell somebody all your plans, and they've got to stop that person. Fights are good. It creates, that action, that drama, but a lot of times the best conflicts are outside of fights. And on that note, give them a chance to not have to fight. If they get into an altercation where it's an intelligent enemy and they have a chance to be like, are you sure you want to do this? And give them a chance to actually say how they would convince them not to do this. And also on that note, if you have a player that gives this extremely impassioned speech and it's very moving and very convincing on why they shouldn't do this thing that they're doing, don't make them roll. Give them the win there because they did go all out and give a valid and good reason for why this NPC shouldn't do what they're doing. Create conversations. Maybe the bad guy is holding a hostage, and so they've got to try and talk their way out of it so that the hostage gets away unscathed. Also, a big thing that I think that has helped, especially in like D&D, instead of doing XP advancement, doing milestone advancement or anything that doesn't require just fighting, is going to give them a lot more reason to not be murder hobos. And then they're not going to just try and kill everything when they first see it. You want them to stop and question whether they should get into this fight. Or maybe give them a reason to think maybe they can't take this fight. Like things that they've heard about this bad guy or things that they've heard about what he can do or what allies he has means that they've got to find a different way than a battle to resolve the issue. One of the things I really like to do is they need to get information from a very specific person. Like just this one person can get them to where they need to go, but that person will only give it to them if they do a favor for them. A lot of times, especially in the beginning, they're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, it's just a favor, whatever. And they'll do it and not ask what that favor is. And then that becomes something else that you can play with down the line when that NPC shows back up and they're like, so about that favor. And if you go against it, it's going to be bad for you. There's going to be conflict there. So either way, they're put in a spot where it creates tension by their choices. You want to find out what your characters want and put obstacles in the way of them getting that information. Even better if you can get them to sign up for something that seems innocuous and comes back to bite them later. Have it be, they've got to go to one of the guards to get information on somebody or to do a drop. And they're like, well, I'll give it to you, but I need you to deliver this note for me. And you're like, okay, it's just delivering a note. And then it turns out that it's a note to assassinate somebody, and you were the last person to be seen near the area where the note was left. You're gonna be a suspect and not them. And that's gonna make things tense and interesting. And you want to bring in backstory. So a lot of players are going to give you a lot to work with. They're going to give you NPCs to hurt them with. They're going to give you reasons they are the way they are as a character. And some of them are going to give you bare bones, nothing. And you can still pull on strings as they start to tell their story in the game. Like, say you've got a player who hasn't given you any backstory and they just make a side comment about a brother. Well, they haven't told you anything about this brother. So then you get to completely come up with everything about them and pull on those strings and be like, oh, so this person does this thing, it affects your brother. And then they're like, oh, wait, how do you? It's really great when you confuse them and they're like, wait, why do you know about this? And that's another thing. Listen to all the little things that your players say, because a lot of times they're going to let out more of their secrets than they think they are in passing conversation. And if you're not paying attention and picking up on that, then you're missing an opportunity to create tension for them down the road. And especially if they've got something that they fear, if they've voiced it or if they've told you separately, play on their fears. Give them a reason to have that fear, and drop small hints about it. Don't just like, oh, they're afraid of spiders and drop them into a pit of spiders. No, like slowly get them more and more wound up about it. Like, they're afraid of spiders. They're going into a dungeon and like they catch one crawling across their boot when they first get in. As they go in farther, they catch one on their arm until they're fighting swarms of spiders. Like, build up the tension towards what they fear. You want them to be wound up. You want them to be concerned about where you're going next with this. And doing small hints and dropping like the small clues is always going to ramp up more tension than big ones. Cliffhangers. We all love a good cliffhanger. And it's especially easy in TTRPGs when you get to the end of a session. You can leave them on a cliffhanger, lull them into complacency 1 a week, and, give them a nice regular ending. And then the next week, the circumstances have changed and they're left unsure of where they stand. Cliffhangers in the middle of a session are also great. Build up tension to a point where they think it's going to be resolved, and then have something interrupt it or switch from one character to another. See what's happening from another point of view. Have it be like they've all gone separate ways in a crowd to try and get to a specific goal. And you were building up tension with one of them and they're about to be caught by a guard. And then you switch to another character and start telling about what they're seeing and what they're doing. And that other player is left wondering, well, what's going to happen to me? Have it so that, maybe they're walking along as a party and all of a sudden they all fall in a hole that somebody created as a bear trap or something in the forest, as they're talking about some really serious subject or something like that. Or maybe they're around a campfire having a serious discussion, and all of a sudden they hear a rustle in the bushes behind them and they're interrupted and don't get to finish that conversation, and they're left wondering what's going to happen in the conversation, but also what's in this bush. If you leave them on uneven ground for long enough, then they're on the edge of their seats for the next piece of information or for what happens next. Just keeping them guessing is honestly going to be the biggest part of building tension at all. Include clues about the background. Like the background of a scene, like they're in town and you hint at something moving in the shadows by the alley, or a feeling that overcomes the party without an apparent cause. Make the environment just off enough that they get jumpy. Like maybe they're walking down an alley and all of a sudden there's a mist that starts to roll in, or there are all asleep and one person's on watch and all of a sudden that person is overcome with a feeling of dread. And do I wake up the party because of this feeling, or do I go and investigate it, or is it nothing and I'm just jumping at shadows? Use little noises, little like There's a scurrying that happens in your periphery. There's, scratching on the inside of a wall that could be rats, but it could be something else as well. You want to keep them, again, off balance. And on that note, use the environment to your advantage. Have the weather affect what they can and can't see. Have bugs or animals or pests of some kind that jump out at them. Are they in the forest? Have all the animals start running in one direction. Are they running from something towards something? They don't know. Uh, Maybe they come and they're entering a forest and it had been raining on them and they were wet and they were miserable, and then they get into the trees and it lets up a little bit, but then they're able to hear, now that they no longer have their cloaks up and the rain isn't pelting against them, the sound of hoofbeats behind them, or take away something that would have been noticeable to to one sense, and then make that sense unusable to the point where they'd be able to hear it. Maybe all of the animals start, all of a sudden they see a bunch of animals running past them, and maybe they hear a crashing coming, so they know something's chasing after them. And well, is it something we want to face, or is it something we want to run from too? Or maybe there's some strange noise in the distance in the direction they're running that seems to be calling to them, and is this something that should be investigated or left alone? Or maybe they're pulled in by the sound as well. The environment can create a lot of tension all on its own. I do mention again farther on, I talk about environment a lot because it's really useful, and I know I haven't been using it enough. So like, say they for cyberpunk, say that they turn a corner and there's a booster gang there, and they're like, oh no, we're gonna have to fight this booster gang, but then all of a sudden there's a crack of thunder and lightning all of a sudden happens, and there's rain, and somebody's cyber gear shouldn't have gotten wet, and all of a sudden there's an electric shock, and then everybody's confused, and are we going to fight? Or you can create tension through ways that don't involve other people as well. Cyberpunk's a little, I mean, you can do it, especially with the cyberware, like if you start making the cyberware mess up. Or like with my city Somnum Exteri, where it's multiple levels, where uh they're stuck in a enclosed car and in an enclosed elevator, and somebody's opened and it's some expired sardines. In that moment, it was the environment that caused the conflict. Another good thing, or another big thing, not just good thing, that is going to help ramp up the tension is how you speak. If you're getting to a really big moment, slow the cadence of your speech. Give pauses between words. Start to lower the tone of your voice so that they feel like they need to lean in closer to hear you. I mean, it's harder to do that digitally than it is in person, where they literally and physically are leaning closer to you. But, sometimes they're leaning closer to their speakers, or they've got to turn up the speaker to hear you better. And they know that you're building to something, and slowly unveil what they see. Don't just describe the murky bog to them. Tell them they crest a hill to be met with mist shrouded. Or bleh. It's helpful if you put punctuation into. Tell them they crest a hill to be met with mist shrouded land spreading before them. A slowly whistling wind intermingles with small burbles from bubbles somewhere around them, while the trees off to the side, they start to creak and groan in the swaying wind. And if you say it slowly and precisely and lower that tone of voice, it's going to make it creepier. It's going to make it more dramatic. And if you start talking loud, and then as you keep talking, you just get a little lower and a little lower and a little lower each time, then that's going to build tension, because they're like, wait, it's not noticeable at first, but then it slowly happens, and they're like, oh no, we're building to something. And then you can surprise them. with something that's going to happen. You can leave it on a cliffhanger, like you're describing this land and like it's obviously building to something. And then, oh, we'll see you next week. Cliffhangers don't just have to be like a big thing is about to happen. Like it can be the unknown is the cliffhanger that you've left them on. Bring up things that seem innocuous. Describe a room and slip in that there's a slightly bedraggled teddy bear sitting on the bed. And then just keep going like it's nothing out of the norm and let them wonder, or mention that there is something in the room that makes them think they've seen it before and maybe it's following them. Like maybe one of your characters at a festival saw a doll that really creeped them out. Skag. And they decide that they're going to, burn it. Make it follow them around. Maybe in a scene they're going to see a doll that kind of looks like it, but maybe not completely, and makes them wonder, is that what that is? Or maybe, it's a dog that they saw in the market and it reminded them of the dog from their childhood. And then they start seeing a dog that looks similar to the dog from their childhood quite often. And they start to wonder, is this a fake creature? Is this the dog from my childhood? What's going on? 1 second. I thought it might be something important. It was just something funny. But the innocuous can be just as tension building as something that's very obviously out of place. Like maybe they keep walking past plants that are slightly off in color. Maybe there's something in the trees that sounds like the tinkling of bells instead of the rustle of leaves, and they keep hearing it in various places. And it's just this thing that follows them around, and until something happens with that, their tension's going to ramp up every time they start to hear it. Split the party. Most players have caught on to this by now, but with a little bit of creativity and maybe a trapdoor or two, it's still totally doable. Or, some of them will play into their characters really well and will voluntarily split the party. And then you can bounce back and forth between these two split parties and build up tension by what each of them is walking towards, what part of the plan each of them are enacting, and go back and forth and build the tension and leave it on. You begin to pick the lock on this door and you hear a sound on the other side, and then you swap to the other half of the party and what they're doing, and make it be a back and forth so that they have that tension through talking about the other party or other half of the party. And then when you get back to them, maybe it was something, maybe it wasn't, but you're relieving that tension just to build more. And like I said earlier, confusion was going to come into play. A thick crowd of loud people, a creeping mist or sudden darkness, illusions, cryptic NPCs. These are all tools of sowing confusion for your players and keeping them off balance for where they stand literally and figuratively. Keeping them off balance is going to build tension organically because they're going to be looking for the next right step. They're going to be trying to find balance. And in trying to find balance, they're going to run into conflict either with themselves or others. And again, all of this builds in together to create all of the tension that we're looking for. And if you have them confused, especially with like a cryptic NPC, maybe they want to search out that NPC again later and they just disappear, not to be seen. There's a lot of different things, especially with NPCs, that you can do to have them build tension by not being there. Like, say they had a contact that they were supposed to meet up with for a mission and they never showed. Do they continue with the mission? Do they go and find this person? Can they continue the mission without this person? And sometimes if there's a mission that for the story, it almost absolutely has to fail, if you take that one key NPC out of play so that they can't complete the mission, then it's something that's not a failure because of anything they did, but it's still something that they've got to come back around to because they did fail in that mission. And again, back to the NPC deaths, or even seeming deaths. See Artena a few weeks ago when I gave almost the entire party a vision of someone they loved dead, and they don't know whether it's true or not, except in one case. Oh, two cases now. uh, but it makes the possibility of death more real for them and close, whether it's in a battle or out of their sight. And sometimes out of their sight creates even more tension since they have to wait to find out the outcome. So, like, yeah, if you've got an important NPC that has been really helpful to the party up to that point, and they're going into battle with the party, and something happens and they go down and they're not able to save them, uh, it makes their deaths even more imminent feeling and real, and like, oh, if they could die, so can I. Or if it is something that's out of sight, you, like with my players, you can keep them guessing for a while on whether this has actually happened to their loved one or not, and keep them on the edge of their seat until they can find out what happened. And sometimes what they find out they think is the truth and it's not. Even more fun. Another way to create tension is be prepared for your combats. Study the stat blocks you'll be using. I'm very bad about this, where I'll be like, all right, this is what they're fighting. And then I won't look at it again until we get into the game. And then I'm like, crap, I don't even know what this thing can do. And so one of the things that I'm very much going to get into is starting to learn more about the stat blocks of bad guys and monsters in both the games that I'm running, so that when we do get to combat, my decisions are quick. Plot out the best use of their abilities in a fight, since you know what your party can do. Maybe the bad guys do too, not necessarily, but sometimes if they know what the party can do, they're going to be prepared for them. And if you're moving more quickly, then they're going to move more quickly. And even if it's just the occasional battle, that clock that I talked about earlier, put that clock on a battle. Like, there's something that's going to happen in a certain amount of time, and they have that many rounds to get it done, but also put an actual clock on it and be like, all right, you're going to have this amount of time for each of your actions. We're going to get through this quickly. This is going to be something that feels more real time for decisions. And also in times like this, use lair actions for the environment around them. So it's not just the bad guys they're fighting, but they're also trying to avoid the effects in the room with them. But if you keep it fast paced and moving, and make it just deadly enough that you're giving them a run for their money, then that's going to build tension. And then by the time they're done with that, they're going to be exhausted as their characters and as the players, because they're like, oh, wait, what do I do? And then all of that anxious tension is then released at the end of the fight, and it gives them a sense of how it would actually be. You don't have to do that for every fight. Some of them just let it happen as they think of what they need to do. Maybe that's not as quick-witted of a bad guy, but especially if you've got an intelligent bad guy, they're going to be quick with their moves. And if the players start taking too long and not thinking through, throw a lair action at them and be like, oh, well, you've taken too long. This happens in the room. Or don't even necessarily skip them, but give them obstacles for planning, since they're taking so long to do it. Make it exciting around it. Also, don't be afraid to alter your bad guys mid-battle. If they're running roughshod over your bad guys, add HP, add an extra action for them each round. One of the very first big battles that I did, I was like, yes, I'm going to do a one-shot where they're high level. Cat got force cage, and my bad guy was useless, and they just took it down. Like, sometimes you got to make a bad guy be like, oh, well, this doesn't affect me, and then have them get out of it. When you're a new DM, especially, you're not going to think of those things. You're going to be like, oh, well, this is what it says it can do, so this is what it can do. But also if your bad guys are doing more damage than you expected, or uh they don't have at hand the proper way to fight them, take away one of their actions each turn, lower their HP, make it an easier fight, or make it be like puny humans or humanoids. You don't scare me, and then they just run, and there's nothing that the party can do about it. But you can do what you want with the bad guys. And this also has a side benefit of them getting the metagamers that are like, well, that's not what this thing can do. And you're like, well, it's not a normal one. So luckily I don't have to deal with rules lawyers like at all so far. So give the party clues that lead them into bigger encounters. Let the tension build based on what they're learning about their foe as they go. If they're in a dungeon, they're walking along and they see scratch marks in the wall from giant claws. They hear a rumbling coming from deeper in the dungeon. They come upon a skeleton. They come upon uh, somewhere where this beast has taken a shit and it's a giant shit, and they're like, oh, this shit is as big as I am. This is going to be a terrifying ass beast. If you build enough tension, you get there. And if it's a bad guy they're not supposed to be able to fight, they're going to look at it and be like, no, and just run, because sometimes that's what they're supposed to do. So if they go someplace where you're not quite ready for them to go, give them a giant beast that's, going to eat them if they get too far into it. Or if it's an intelligent foe, leave little notes and anecdotes that they run into around, like they hear a rumor while they're in the market about this person, or one of their contacts has sent them a note that gives some dire warning about them. Leave little things around so that they fear the bad guy more than they would have without any of that information. You don't want to have them like not wanting to go into the battles necessarily, unless that's your whole point. Sorry, I have a piece of hair on my eyelash and it's driving me bug nuts. Okay. But if you ramp up their anxiety about a foe, or like they hear that this gladiator that they're supposed to fight to be able to get information is undefeated, and it can only be one-on-one, and one of them has to go in and fight them, and then it builds up all this tension leading up to like, oh no, what are we going to do, who's going to be the one that fights them. But you want to make them fear what they're walking into. And most importantly, you need to watch how your players are reacting. If what you're trying isn't building the tension the way that you want it to, then switch tactics. Throw them off with something else. Or if they're really reacting to something that you've done, build on that. Like if a certain voice has worked and every time you start to drop into that voice, they start to get tense because they're like, oh no, what are they going to do to us now? TTRPGs are a collaborative effort, not just in storytelling, but also in creating the tension. And if you're not paying attention to the reactions of the players, it's going to fall flat. But as long as you at least keep trying and try new things, you're going to make it so that things work out. Oh, it's giving me options for what I can do. All right. So now that I have the chat back up, Tim says favorite feel to make players feel equals mistaken identity, and suddenly your players are having to explain why they don't have the gold for the loan shark who is a were-shark. But yeah, you want to build up tension to and just had a good point made in chat with Kat. The type of tension that you're building to. You want to make sure that the players are still having fun, and that they aren't getting genuinely upset and frustrated. I've seen this happen a couple of times, and sometimes that's just how that character would react. And while I'm not a firm believer in but it's what my character would do, sometimes the player's genuine upsetness about what's happening is because they've so fully immersed themselves in their character that they're like, oh, well, this is gonna make it weird, but it's, it's also going to up the tension. Because players can create tension in it as well, but you don't want them frustrated and upset as a player with what you're doing. And also with the tension, watch the players for if one of the player's characters is doing something and it's visibly upsetting one of the other characters. It might be causing the wrong kind of tension that you want at your table. We want to make sure everybody's, because we're all there to have fun. This isn't a job, this is a hobby. Some of us are going to make money off of it, some of us aren't, but it's something that we do for fun. But yes, tension is good, tension is grand, and it's something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I need to work on. I have a tendency to, unless I write something out, I don't get descriptive enough. I don't get I don't get the tone of voice going. I'm a pantser with how I tell stories, and sometimes that bites me in the ass, especially with the tension. So I'm trying to at least write out some scenes beforehand so that I have a feel on where they're going to be and why there would be tension. Because a lot of times improving tension is a learned skill, and it is not one I have learned yet. But in my searches, I have found lots of good suggestions and a lot of good material for what makes good tension in a game and how to build that tension. One of the things I do want to do to help build tension is yes, Kelly, I am a pantser. Well, as somebody said, I'm a plotzer because I plot some things out, but then I run by the seat of my pants for most of it. But yeah, creating tension is something I'm going to strive for. I'm going to try and get better at. Another thing that's going to help the tension, and it's one of the things that I have the biggest problem with, is staying in the moment and in character. Like, yes, we're supposed to be having fun, making the side jokes and the tangents and stuff like that. But when you get to a serious moment, you need to try and make sure that you're drawing everybody in enough that the side tangents and all of that aren't going to detract from it. So by drawing everybody's attention into it, they're less likely to do that. Because we see me on screen, I'm constantly cracking up and almost falling out of my chair at some of the shit that my players say or that other characters or DMs say. And so it's one of those things that you just kind of got to feel it out. But yeah, thanks for coming to chat with me today. I'm going to close it out with talking about things that we have going on and coming up because there's lots of exciting things. Tomorrow night is the next episode of At the Threshold with our very own North Shore DM, Chad, running running the show. He's doing great with building tension with just having it that we don't remember shit as characters. And it's a very good way to build tension. On Friday is our next episode of Cyberpunk, where they have just been trapdoored down to the prison level against their will to do stuff. And crap, that reminds me, I meant to do commands for each of the shows so that it gives a little blurb about them. Oh well, I will do that later today. But we're having lots of fun with Cyberpunk and all the fun things that we're learning about there. That one's, I think I'm doing really good with the tension in that one, but also I don't know the mechanics well enough, so a lot of times we get pulled out of that tension. No, Somnomic Stary is Friday, not tomorrow, Cat. Time is a weird soup. On Saturday for me, you can find, or no, not this Saturday, crap. We're actually going to be off for 2 more weeks for Sister Cities, because some is personal reasons and some is uh to better build into the story, and I'm super excited with what's happening with Candy, and I really want to talk about it, but I also don't want to give shit away. So you can catch that back in a couple of weeks. Monday we are back with Madness Takes Artena for the next bit of that. We do have just the 2 more episodes, and then we've got our mid-season break because we're already halfway through a season, and that is wild. How did that happen? But that does make it so that the mid-season break does line up with both At the Threshold and Somnum Exteri. So that means the breaks are going to be longer breaks for me. So I actually get some time where I'm not constantly on camera. Cat is shocked. And then next Tuesday is going to be more watercolor wizardry with Maria. She does really great stuff. Stop being weird, chat. I'm going to plug Maria here. She did Scoria and Brasco for her upcoming campaign, which the first of 2 one-shots is going to be on the 19th. Yes, the 19th. Where we get to be introduced to that world, and it's going to be another completely different 5e homebrew for what we've got on the channel. We've got 3 5e games, but they're all so wildly different that it doesn't feel like we're playing the same game always. And then next Wednesday, I will be back with another Curiosities, since we had a couple of commentaries in a row, and then we'll get back into a flow of going back and forth. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next week yet. So if there's anything you want to hear about, whether it's world building or DM GM tips, let me know. And we can, start having people come up with what they want to hear and what they want to talk about. Because if you like my DM GM tips, then maybe I'll do more. Yes, words are hard, y'all. We do also have that. Kat, if you want to plug merch, in the store now, we have a second design other than just the logo. We have a catchphrase that works for so many people in the community at large of words are hard, y'all. And they do come on a coffee mug because words are even harder before coffee. Otherwise, we will be right back, folks. No. Cat's giving me side eye. But yes, stay tuned for all the fun stuff coming up. Meet all of our great characters in the new show, and I'll see you tomorrow on At the Threshold. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Bye.